Hi, everybody. First off, I have to give thanks to Lucy and Martha and all of the staff at SAQA for doing such a great job helping us prepare and for making textile talks possible. It's really an honor. I thank you very much. Let's see the picture of my quilt, please. This is Becoming One with the Night. It's the work that I have in Beyond the Mirror. This is a work that shows two realities at once. We have a foreground of a young woman on a porch, and we have a background that could be how she feels, where she is, what her experiences have been. It's a way to show two realities at once and to show beyond the surface of her. So I have some pictures about how this was made, but I want to go back in time for a minute first and talk about how I got to this point. Next, please. This is my very first art quilt. I made it in around 2010. It's about 8 inches by 10 inches. You see on the right there, it has a place of honor above my working junk in my studio, and it's right next to my head in my Zoom picture. I don't show this because I think it's a great work, but because it was very important to me, and for a couple of reasons. The first is the way that I constructed it. At the time when I was in this textile group, I was really just learning about fabrics and how to work with them. I had never been a quilter before. So not knowing what else to do, I collaged this as the way to put it together. I had done some mixed media and some collage work, so I was comfortable with that. And that has stayed part of my practice, though I've changed a lot about how I work. Putting things together as collage was something that started then, and that has not changed. Second thing, which is really the more important one, is that this little work just had a gut punch experience to me when I looked at it. And the reason is I had never done work that was a self-portrait. I had never done work that was really about anything. I'd done still lifes and landscapes and pictures and, but nothing that had a story. And in this one, I actually buried a story in the surface itself. That text that you see in the body and in the foreground, I typed out some words that told the story about my name. My given name is Barbara. I changed it to Bobbi when I was in elementary school. It was a big deal. It was kind of an act of defiance and sort of stating who I am, and I have stayed Bobbi ever since. So to me, looking at that work really meant something, and it just turned on a light in my head. And I said, oh, I can use collage, quilting, and textiles to tell stories, things that are internal and meaningful. And that was a really important thing to experience. And that has stayed part of my practice as I focused on my main body of work about the journey, and in particular, a girl's journey. Next, please. So now we're back to becoming one with the night. And on the left, that's where I have started to rough out the picture. I had a photograph that I started with. My next door neighbor, a lovely young woman, came over and modeled for me. She sat on the porch. And then I took that photo, I manipulated it, I simplified it. And then the way I chose to enlarge it for this one was by drawing by hand with a grid system. So that was going to give me my template. Next. And so now I've started to put the image on the fabric. I've traced it from that piece of paper onto muslin. All of my image making is with acrylic paints. That's the big change from that first little collage that I made. Those were purchased fabrics. I don't purchase any commercial fabrics anymore. I only use plain muslin and sheer polyester and acrylic paints. And they will go on in varying degrees of thickness and applied in different ways. This was the one place where I wanted to be the darkest. I wanted a really good pop kind of dark background behind her head. And so I painted it on. Next. This shows the under layer of the quilt. You can see that that section that's the right 2/3 of the quilt ended up having a forest tree-filled kind of image. It didn't start that way. It started as a lot of individual squares, and each one of those squares is collaged and composed, and those pieces are primarily monoprints on different kinds of fabric. All I knew in advance is that I wanted the girl to be in the foreground and I wanted some sort of blue mood behind her. I really didn't know how it was going to progress, but this is how I started. Next. This is sewing the piece, and I included this to show the machine that I work on. I just have a little small machine like you would use for garment making. I use this for all of my construction and for all of my quilting. And so that means I have to learn how to design and how to compose so that I can quilt as I go and so that I can work in small enough pieces that I can get them through the little throat of the machine. When you collage, your fabric gets pretty stiff, and so I couldn't get a great big piece through there. And so I like to think of that not as a limitation, that's a design challenge, how to make it interesting to put something together in a way that I can actually make it. Next, please. So now we're going to look at a few other pieces. I made this one a few years before becoming one with the night. This is the Flight of the Magical Lawn Chair. And it shows, all the ones we're going to look at have the images of the girls in some kind of scene. And in this case, I chose to do the girls just as a silhouette. They are cut out of painted muslin and then collaged and then stitched onto the background. That's from a photo of my sister and myself when we were little. I'm the one on my left with my little feet sticking out. And as you might guess, we never really did get on a magic lawn chair and fly away into the night, but I liked to imagine how everything about our life would have been different if we did, and what an adventure that would have been. Next, please. This is neither here nor there. I made this probably about in between the lawn chair and becoming one with the night. It's my same model, my next door neighbor, again, although in this piece, even when I depict the figure in a more realistic way than the silhouettes on the little girls in the lawn chair, I want her to be universal. So I just do the barest suggestion of features so that it really could be any young woman. And even her age is ambiguous. She might be 10, she might be a teenager. You can insert your own story in there. And another motif that I use a lot is this image of the ladder back chair. It implies a memory place for me. And so she's just in between one stage and the next. Next, please. This is a more recent work. This is Overlooked. Again, I've drawn the figure directly. She is even more universal. I gave her no facial features. One thing that's new in this piece is the incorporation of the photo transfer. I use that a good deal now. I like to do my own photo transfers. I think they pop really nicely. And the inspiration for this was the windows. They were tossed aside in my sister's yard and overgrown and overlooked. And they seem to me to be a very beautiful metaphor for a little girl who maybe also feels like she's being overlooked and not getting much attention in her garden. Next. From the place where we landed is another way to envision a girl on a journey. As is frequent in my work, this is more metaphorical than real. It's not about a real tree going through a real house. It's just something she's been through and she's landed, and now she's looking back. She's also, I think her pose and her head tilt allows you to put your own story in there as to how she's doing or how old she is or how, exactly what this experience is that she's been through. It gives you a lot to look at and wonder what the story is there. Next. This is Look Through to the Memory. It's the most recent work that I've done. I'm very grateful that this is right now in the Visions Art Museum in San Diego, virtually, in their Visions 2020 show. This has some of the same characteristics that we've seen. Their layers are built up through collage. There's a photo transfer there. The window is photo transferred, and also the water that you see down in one of the panes is a photo transfer. The rest of it is all various kinds of image making with acrylic paints. Some of the parts that look heavier, like the lower left quadrant, is heavier. That's an opaque muslin fabric. The parts that look more ethereal or transparent actually are transparent fabric. And when I print in a loose or lighter way on the transparent fabric, it has that ethereal look. This is really about the little girl, but she's not the first thing you see. You might have to look around for a while before you see her there seated atop the window. Next frame, please. There's a close-up. And again, I've chosen a different way of depicting her. I did some drawing with a marker and pencils here to create her form. And again, she's in the environment, but she's feeling a little lost in that environment. And so you have to look before you see her. So all of my works, I hope they give you something visually interesting to see, and I hope they give you a story to wonder about. I like to use the analogy of a favorite book, that you can come back to it over and over again and find something new each time. And if I create works that spark that kind of story, well, then I feel like I've done what I hoped when I started out with the piece.